Okay, in compliance with Chapter 231 of the Open Public Meeting Act of the State of New Jersey, adequate notice has been given to all members of the governing body, the local source, and the Westfield Leader, the two newspapers designated to receive such notice. Notice is also posted on the Borough Hall bulletin board. Let's start with a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so let the record reflect that all members of council are on. We also have John Post, our borough attorney, Matt Deanna, the director of Public Works, Martha Lopez, the municipal clerk, Frank Musella, the head of recreation, Jill Good, our CFO, and Tom Atkins, our borough administrator. I don't think I forgot. Oh, Joe Giannuzzi is also on, the chief of police, and Mike Disco, our borough engineer. Okay, so we might as well get started. Okay, the first thing we have is to designate the bond anticipation note and the special emergency note as qualified tax exempt obligations. I guess, Jill, that would be you.
Right, this is just a formality. It's a resolution that's every year making the tax exempt.
Okay, anyone have any questions on that? It's pretty routine. We do it every time we do a bond anticipation note. Okay, so the next one is the authorization to issue estimated tax bills. Again, Jill, I guess that's you.
Right, so this, the state of New Jersey is ending their fiscal year. Typically, go out to the end of the state of New Jersey.
Jill, you're not coming in that clear.
I'll try to get it better.
A little.
Okay, I was saying the state of New Jersey is extending.
Much better.
Okay, state of New Jersey is extending their fiscal year, so they're encouraging the municipality to do an estimated tax bill. We typically do this anyway, and I'll work the rate up and mail it to everybody. The only rate I'm waiting for is the county.
What's the last part, Jill? What are you waiting for?
Waiting for the county.
Okay. You have the Board of Ed?
I have the Board of Ed. I heard the county introduced at a flat rate, but they have to equalize it amongst all the municipalities.
Okay, so anybody have any questions on issuing the estimated tax bills? No? Okay, so the next thing is the department refunds. Frank, that's usually you. Unmute yourself, Frank.
That would help. We have some refunds for the pool, and we have the refunds for the spring soccer, which didn't occur.
Okay, well, all standard stuff, right? Nobody
Yes.
has any questions on that, right? How many refunds on the pool are we giving back tonight?
I don't know how many went through. I believe there's only now.
One or two, Frank.
One, two.
Yeah, one or two, I recall.
I know that we had a request. I don't know how many.
Okay, we're going to talk about the pool towards the end of the meeting anyway, so we're gonna come back to that. Okay, next we have the resolution 63, 2020. Is this something that we're passing tonight, Martha?
Yes.
Okay, so does somebody want to make a motion on this resolution? It should be in the package. Somebody want to do that? If not, I'll do it. Somebody can.
So I have it here if you want me to. Do you want it to be read too?
Well, I don't think it needs to be read. I think you can summarize it if possible. If you want to read it, it's fine, but
It's just the extension of the property tax grace period.
no,
For the
that's the next one.
Oh, that's the next one.
Before 63-220, Rachel.
I apologize.
It's okay.
That's the conducting the annual budget examination.
Correct.
So moved.
Second.
Jill, you want to just give a little explanation on it?
Sure. That just means that we examined our budget ourselves, and we're allowed to do that every 2 years.
Why are we allowed to do it, Jill? You're not coming in that clear.
Sure. I'm sorry. We met the criteria to self-review our own budget.
And what's the criteria, Jill?
It's, having no audit comments and things like that.
Within the 2% cap also, I'm assuming?
Everything, right. So every third year, the state reviews your budget, and 2 out of 3 years before that, you can review your own budget. You do that all the time.
Okay, anyone have any questions of Jill on that?
I do not.
No.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. Martha, poll the council.
Councilwoman Andre,
Yes.
Councilman Dierkes,
Yes.
Councilman Messler,
Yes.
Councilwoman Pacifico,
Yes.
Councilwoman Pater,
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Okay, next we have resolution 64-2020, which we are going to take action on tonight. This is the one for the extension of the property tax grace period. Governor Murphy issued an executive order extending the grace period for the May 1st, 2020 taxes, which are the second quarter. He extended it to June 1st, 2020. If your taxes are not in by June 1st by statute, the interest accrues back to May 1st. So this is just a resolution implementing the extension that Governor Murphy already ordered under Executive Order 130. So I need a motion for this resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, let's poll the council.
Councilwoman Andre,
Yes.
Councilman Dierkes,
Yes.
Councilman Messler,
Yes.
Councilwoman Pacifico,
Yes.
Councilwoman Pater,
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Okay, if you just give me a minute. Okay, so the next one is we're going to be discussing the authorization to approve the settlement in the matter of Alpine at Mountainside LLC versus the Borough of Mountainside. We will be taking any questions.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yeah.
It looks like we have a problem with people trying to sign in. Matt Flynn, I need your help here because they're asking, they can't seem to get in.
Paul, you want to do number 7 while we're trying
Okay.
to fix that?
Deanna, people who follow Mountainside's Facebook page, they'll see this link up on the Facebook page, and they should be able to just comment right underneath this YouTube link. It's posted for the public, and it's up and running.
The top right. Is that what you said, the top right, Matt?
No, it's right underneath in the comments section on Facebook, underneath the YouTube link for this live stream. People can post comments, and I have it posted there as well on Facebook. It says, "Please post all questions in the comment section."
Okay, perhaps they're not members of our Facebook page, so I'm just letting them know.
Okay,
Just give them a moment, please.
sure. Possible confusion could be is that this is not a Facebook live stream. It's a YouTube live stream. So that may be why, if there is any confusion, because with a Facebook live stream, we'll be seeing things more so in real time.
Oops. What did I just do?
Matt, you want to try a test to see if it's going to go through? See if the
Sure. I'll write a question on the town's on the borough's Facebook page. Second here.
There's one test comment on there. Do you see that, Dee, on
Yep.
Facebook?
Yep, JD Bryden, he
Mhm.
commented.
Yep.
Yeah, I just got on too. Yeah, did you see mine?
You
Yes.
got to unmute, Deanna.
I'm sorry, I just see Matt Flynn's and JD's.
Is it possible that people are waiting for the presentation to be made first and then ask questions?
They're sending them via Messenger.
I'm getting, well, not all the messages, no.
How many people are watching the
Yes.
stream?
Yes.
Yes, people are watching the stream, and
So maybe we could instruct or explain now for those who are watching the stream how they can pose a question.
Matt just did that, Matt Flynn.
So I have Miss Giordano asking if we see a note from her husband, and I don't see one. Rachel, do you?
I do not.
just right in
Matt, do you
the.
think it would be worthwhile to go back over the instructions that you just gave everybody so that they?
Sure. I'll write them out again. I'll write in a
Yeah.
larger.
I can see Giordano's comment. He's commenting on YouTube.
Okay, well, that's different. Let me go over to YouTube.
Well, Rachel, you're gonna have to get YouTube because I can't be in both.
I know you stay on Facebook, Dee, in
I
case any,
think
let me
that
try to
Matt
find on
said-
YouTube.
Guys, I think Matt said that's where you have to pose the questions, on YouTube. Is that correct, Matt?
No, it's best to
No.
post the questions on Facebook.
Instructions that you just gave everybody.
Let's give them both options. So if you can get on that, Rachel.
I'm trying, yes, right now. Mm-hmm.
It looks like it's on the YouTube chat. All the questions are going there. Please confirm if you receive Mr. Giordano's questions.
I see him on here.
On the YouTube chat.
Yes.
Okay, so that's where they're all going.
If it's okay, I'll have Matt read them because I cannot find them on the chat and I don't want to waste more time.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Can you please do that?
Sure.
Okay, not yet though, Matt.
All right, there's,
Okay.
there's no actual real question yet, just people asking if people can see this.
Okay, so John, why don't you give your initial presentation on this?
Sure, Paul. Initially, all of the people who received notice of the planning board hearing regarding the Alpine application were also given notice that we were going to be having this public meeting tonight so that they'd have an opportunity to see what was going to be discussed and participate by way of comment or question, et cetera. So hopefully anybody who wants to avail themselves of that opportunity will be able to do so. In terms of the topic is a recommendation that I am making in my capacity as the borough attorney to settle or resolve a dispute between the borough and Alpine at Mountainside LLC, the developer of the 30-unit project over on Route 22 West that is part of our affordable housing program. But before getting to the actual recommendation, I'm going to subject some of you, including residents with whom I've corresponded, to a history of the situation so that you see what brought us to where we are today. And the history starts with Alpine, or that site being the site of a builder's remedy lawsuit that goes back many years, and that ultimately resulted in an overall settlement of the borough's Mount Laurel obligations, the adoption of an affordable housing plan that was endorsed by a special master and ultimately by a Superior Court judge, and resulted in a judgment on behalf of the borough of Mountainside that as long as we complied with our affordable housing plan, that we would be immune, we being the borough, from any builder remedy suits for 10 years following the entry of that judgment, and the judgment was back in 2016 or 17, as I recall. So we have, as long as we comply with the terms of our affordable housing plan, we have immunity from the kinds of builder remedy lawsuits that have plagued adjoining towns and continue to do so for years now. So part of the plan, the affordable housing plan, as I mentioned before, was that we would permit the development of an affordable or an inclusionary project on the Alpine site, which is a 5-acre site. The density factor that was provided for in our affordable housing plan was 6 units per acre with a 20% set aside. And so in order to continue to enjoy the immunity that I just mentioned, it was necessary that that project be approved by the planning board and go forward as envisioned. And to that end, Alpine made an application to the planning board and received an approval by way of a resolution from the planning board several years ago. Now, when they made the application and appeared before the planning board, it was an approval to construct what I'm referring to as a condominium project. After the planning board granted its approval, Alpine went back and asked whether they could also have the ability to rent the units in the project. And they were told at that time by Vince Laughlin, the planning board attorney, that they would have to go back and seek an amended approval from the planning board if that's what they wanted to do. Alpine elected not to do that, but instead to just go ahead and assume they were going to be able to rent the units. And they tried to do so, resulting in the borough saying, we are not going to issue C of Os until you go back to the planning board. That resulted in a lawsuit that was brought against the borough by Alpine. And that lawsuit was heard by Judge Dupuy, the general equity judge in Elizabeth. And Judge Dupuy ruled in our favor in an opinion that she issued in November of 2019. That opinion has been made available certainly to all the members of the governing body and also to any member of the public who was asked for it or was interested in it. The two significant points in Judge Dupuy's decision where one, she said, consistent with the law in New Jersey, that the borough does not have the ability to differentiate between rental and ownership when it comes to its efforts to regulate or control the development of the Alpine property. When that was no surprise, I should add, that was the law of New Jersey, and Judge Dupuy, in the opinion, cited a number of precedents that established that legal principle in New Jersey. Judge Dupuy also said that that Alpine should go back to the planning board and seek an amended approval with respect to its project, which is the position that I had taken as the borough attorney in the litigation. And in that sense, at least, the decision by the judge was a victory for the borough. Alpine, consistent with what the judge had then, or Judge Dupuy had said, went back and filed an application with the planning board for an amended approval, seeking to have permission to rent the property, the properties. And the property, by properties, I mean the 24 market units that are part of the project. When Alpine made that application to the planning board, I consulted with Vince Laughlin, who is the planning board attorney, John Chadwick, who was the planner for the planning board, and we concluded that we could probably do better for the borough and better for the neighbors if, instead of having the planning board here just proceed and have a decision from the planning board, we tried to sit down with the builder or the developer and get some concessions from the developer with respect to the conversion of the project from a condominium into a rental project. And it was for that reason, and only for that reason, that I became involved and the governing body became involved in discussions with the builder. The whole idea, or the developer, the whole idea was to see whether we could make a better deal for the borough via that route than if the developers simply proceeded with a hearing before the planning board and the planning board reached a decision. But one of the reasons for coming to that conclusion was that it was very clear that if the planning board followed the law, it was simply going to have to give Alpine permission to rent the units, because as indicated in Judge Dupuy's decision, that was the law of New Jersey. So based on that conclusion, I have been involved, along with Mr. Laughlin, in discussions with the builder regarding a potential settlement of this dispute. And by settlement of the dispute, I mean not coming to a conclusion. It doesn't mean then that there has to be more proceedings before the planning board and potential litigation. We just resolve this question once and for all and stop the bleeding with respect to legal fees, et cetera, that has been going on for quite a long time now. And the conclusion that we came to was that we had made a deal with the Alpine, which we believe is, don't believe it, is one that we recommend to the borough as an appropriate settlement. And we're very satisfied that it's a better deal than what had been forthcoming for the neighbor, or the borough had the planning board here just proceeded before the planning board just proceeded to an eventual decision. And to just outline the essential terms of the decision or the settlement that we are recommending to the governing body, they are as follows. One, Alpine would have the ability to rent the units, the market units, not the affordable units, but they would have to agree that except for the 2 units that they had sold originally before this all started, and which they have now agreed to buy back from the purchasers, except for those units, the minimum rent for each unit would be $4,500 per month, number one. With respect to the 2 units that I just mentioned, since they had already made a deal to lease back those units to the original purchasers, the rent there would be $4,000 a month, because that's what the deal they had made before these discussions began. And Mr. Unchester, I sent you an email in which I indicated that that minimum rent was $2,000 per month. In fact, that was a typo in my office. The minimum rent for those 2 units is $4,000 a month. So we have, of the 24 units, the minimum rent for 22 of them will be $4,500 per month. On the other two, as long as they are being leased to the original purchasers, it's $4,000 per month. That's item number one. Item number two, the minimum term for any lease on any of these units is 1 year. There will be no subletting permitted. That is a question that had been raised to me, and a good question from one of the residents, as I've been talking with them about this situation, and Alpine has agreed to that. Alpine can also only rent to families. They can't have anything other than families. As we define a family in our borough code, have to be the tenants. Now, when Alpine proposes to get a C of O for any one of these units, or a continued C of O if it's a C of O for a unit that's been occupied before, they'll have to go into the borough zoning official and present a copy of a lease which comports with the requirements that I just set out. And these are not requirements, as I mentioned before, that could have been imposed with respect to, or by the planning board, if the planning board had entertained the application to their conclusion. Alpine also had, there are other terms in settlement. Another significant term is that have to provide the borough with a release. When the litigation was ongoing last year, they served us with a notice of a tort claim alleging damages of $7,500 per month, and they're going to give us a release with respect to that claim, so that we won't have to worry, as I mentioned before, about any more by way of litigation or legal fees in connection with the settlement is designed to put an end and to all of the disputes and controversies. Now, I've had dialogue and email exchanges with some residents in connection with this settlement that's being recommended, and there had been a question raised with respect to Alpine's financial circumstances and whether they would be able to make a go of the project if they were going to be renting. And when I passed on those concerns to Alpine's attorney, they told me that they would get some comfort for us with respect to those issues from Alpine's lender on the project. And today I received a copy of a letter from Columbia Bank, which is Alpine's lender, which I can read to you. It's not that long a letter, but it, I think, responds or addresses the questions, or some of the questions at least, that have been posed with respect to Alpine's financial circumstances. And the letter reads as follows: Gentlemen, Columbia Bank has been doing business with Shlomi Adani for over 20 years. In addition to the 30-unit age-restricted project Alpine at Mountainside, we have financed over a dozen real estate projects with him over the last 10 years, totaling over $100 million, which includes a diversified mix of office, retail, and multifamily projects throughout Middlesex and Union counties. Our experience shows that his construction projects have consistently met or exceeded all projected completion and stabilization target dates and created positive economic and aesthetic results for those buildings, which Columbia Bank now proudly includes among its portfolio of real estate loans. The bank fully expects Mountainside Rental Project to be a positive addition to that portfolio. Columbia Bank is the existing lender on the Alpine at Mountainside project, and the loan, along with every other loan in this relationship, remain fully satisfactory and in good standing. Once the project is fully stabilized, we would be very interested in providing the permanent mortgage financing. As a New Jersey-based bank headquartered in Fair Lawn, with a deep commitment to the communities and customers we serve, Columbia Bank is proud to be involved with Shlomi Adani and his products. Hoping this serves your need, I remain very truly yours, Gerard S. Kamenek, regional vice president. So that's the letter that I just referred to and that has been provided by Alpine to address some of the financial concerns that have been expressed by residents. And that's really about as much as I have to say regarding the settlement. And I'm happy to entertain any, well, let me say that not only do I recommend it against Lockton, the planning board attorney recommends it, John Chadwick, our planner, recommends it, and we see it as the most appropriate way for the borough to bring to an end dispute that's been ongoing with Alpine for quite some time now. And with that, I'll entertain any questions.
Matt D. and Matt Flynn, you may have questions coming in?
We're on a 20-second delay.
Okay.
I have some questions. Hang on one second. Get back to my Facebook here. All right, from Brock Giordano. Mr. Post, what happened to the 55 and over? Is that still part of this deal?
Absolutely.
Okay. Another one from Brock Giordano. What is the maximum occupancy per unit and how will that be monitored?
The maximum occupancy per unit is a function of the definition of family that we have in our borough code. That in and of itself could be a topic of discussion because we have had to litigate that definition in other contexts involving other parts of town. I'm not going to get into what those were, but the definition has been upheld by our municipal judge. We believe it's a legally defensible constitutional definition, and that's the definition that Alpine has agreed would be the controlling definition with respect to the number of occupants in these units. Obviously, the size of the unit also bears on the question.
Okay, another question here from Tina Amilda. Sorry if I got your name wrong, but what is the $4,500 based on? Was it based on the current market rates? Do they currently have any pending leases at this rate?
When we initially, the answer to the last question is yes. We had been shown leases where $4,500 per month is the monthly rental for the unit. And that was a number that was generated by Alpine. We did not come up with that number, and it was based upon the presentation they made when they initiated the conversation about converting to rental units.
Can't hear. Can you hear him? Okay. Let's see. I got a bunch here. All right. Another one from Brock Giordano. The developer who once thought he could sell you. No, that's not a question. John and Dottie Unchester. Will the borough require a financial disclosure statement from the developer to ensure the developer can meet all mortgage debt, property taxes, insurance obligations based on the rental plan?
We didn't have the right to require that kind of disclosure from the developer, but when we went to the developer and expressed to the developer the concerns that Mr. Unchester had voiced, as I alluded to earlier, the developer was forthcoming with regard to the letter from Columbia Bank that I just read.
All right. Another question here from Tina Amilda. Has a developer ever managed a leasing project like this before?
I don't know that.
All right.
I think their letter, John, from Columbia Bank says it has.
If you'll give me just a moment, I'm going to look at that letter. I have it on my screen, and I might be able to. The description in the letter of the other Alpine projects is a, quote, diversified mix of office, retail, and multifamily projects throughout Middlesex and Union counties. So if you, I guess it would be multifamily projects, but I don't know whether they were rental or condominium. So we can't parse from that letter an answer to Ms. Almeida's question. I don't have a problem going back and asking the attorney for Alpine to answer that question for us. And Ms. Almeida, if you're watching, I will get the answer to that question and send it to you tomorrow.
All right. I got another question here from Brock Giordano saying that the developer has neglected the property. There are dead trees scattered throughout. I don't know if that's something we can.
I think that's a property maintenance issue. And we were going to ask, as part of our dialogue with the developer, we were going to ask Mike Disco Jr., the borough engineer, to go over and talk with Mr. Unchester about concerns he has regarding some of the plantings. And I would ask that Mr. Disco also, if there are issues involving property maintenance, that he also, one, note those and come back to me so that we can take those up with the builder. My understanding is that the builder would address any such issues that were genuine.
Okay. I see a lot of questions here. The age is 55 and over, correct?
I spoke with John Chadwick about that today. He told me it's 62.
So the age is 62.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think
Well,
that's
that's
correct.
what John Chadwick told me today.
That's 62.
Yes.
Okay.
I have to tell you, that conversation occurred late in the day, and I wasn't really able to check, but he told me 62. That it seems a little bit on the older side to me, but that's what he told me.
John, can you confirm that for us, please, and get out to the public?
Yes.
It's in the agreement. I think it's 55.
Was it a 50? It changed from a 55 community to a 62?
The age restriction is a statutory restriction, and I wasn't sure myself of exactly what it was, and I checked with Mr. Chadwick late today, and he told me 62. But as I said, when I have more time, I'll check that.
I'm going to look right now.
All right. I have another one here from John and Dottie Unchester. How can we be assured that the 55 and over will not be changed down the road, given the fact that we were told that there would be no rentals?
Two things would be required in order to change the 55, the age restriction, whether it's 55 or 62. First, the borough would have to agree to it. And secondly, assuming that the borough agreed to it, we would have to replicate the process whereby it was put in place in the first place. And I sent to the members of the governing body in the last couple of days a copy of a letter from the Alpine's attorney that as I recall, was dated July 16th of 2019. And at a stage in this process, that Alpine was asking the borough to consider lifting the age restriction. I asked her to tell me, or to confirm for me, what I believe to be the rather lengthy, difficult legally process that would have to be undertaken in order to accomplish that. And she sent that letter. It involves going back to the court, get the court to approve the lifting of the age restriction, assuming that the borough would agree to it. And that's what would have to happen. before there could be a change in the age restriction.
All right. I have a lot of questions here about replanting dead trees that I know Mike Disco, we said we'll take a look at, so we can handle that. Will Alpine or anyone perform background checks on the potential renters?
That is a matter of landlord due diligence that we did not get involved with in our discussions with them. But you know, if you're talking about this kind of a project with rentals that are this high, I would assume in the usual course that a landlord would do due diligence.
Okay. Another one from Mrs. Almeida. How would the town disclose and communicate if the developer requests a release from the $4,500 minimum rent?
We would require that they modify the agreement that will be in place. And that will be a matter that will come before the governing body.
That's correct.
All right. Dottie and John Unchester, the Columbia Bank letter is a reference letter. I'm asking for a financial statement indicating the inbound cash flows minus the expenses.
We're not entitled to that from the developer. By we, I mean the borough.
All right. And then Dottie and John Unchester said it was originally set at 62 years of age for the affordable, not the market value units, which were at 55 and over.
That's a clarification that I'm going to get from Mr. Chadwick.
Okay.
It's possible that he was referring to the affordable units.
All right. Another one here from Brock Giordano. Can I please get on the list for maintenance for the trees and drainage along my property and my neighborhoods?
I would suggest that you mention that to Mr. Disco, who will be going down to the property for a site visit in any event. That would be the time to do that.
All right, Kathy Jackowitz, this is just a comment. Rentals is not what Mountainside is about. It's if the developer was greedy about this original pricing, Mountainside residents should not have to suffer due to this agree.
We don't have the prerogative to say no. That is the legal principle that people have to understand. It's not our prerogative. They know they can't rent these units.
All right, and then another one from Ms. Almeida. Did the developer explain why the change from selling units to the renting of the units?
The developer indicated initially that they were having trouble finding people, in part because of the age restriction, who were willing to buy the units.
All right, that's all I have at this moment.
I would encourage, if there's anybody that has questions that they'd like to follow up with, any member of the public, you can send me an email. My email is jpost, J-P-O-S-T, @postpolic, that's all one word, POSTPOLAK.com. jpost@postpolic.com. I'll be happy to respond to any emails that any member of the public wants to send me with respect to the reasons why we're recommending the settlement or anything else having to do with the project.
Mike, I know you're on this call also. You're going to go out and do an inspection about the trees and talk to those people for us.
I certainly will, Mayor. I mean, we have been out there upon the completion of the landscaping 2 years ago. They had done more than what was on the required site plan. If there's dead trees in the interim, we'll certainly go out and look at it, as Mr. Post has asked me to.
I think, Mike, Mr. Unchester had also indicated to me that he had some concerns about whether the planting that was required had been completed, and I said that you would look into that also. You would go over that with him.
Okay.
All right, I have a couple more coming in here. From Brock Giordano, the people understand that you approved this in the first place under the certain terms, and now they can't apparently be met, I guess, from selling to renting, but no, another one is it going to have effect on the Barnes track? Will they ask to be rentals too?
It's not going to have any effect on the Barnes tract at all. I spoke to Richard Osler from, who represents the developer of the Barnes tract this afternoon, just to make sure that we had crossed all of our T's and dotted all of our I's on this issue. And he authorized me to state publicly tonight at this meeting, his name is Richard Osler, that he, Richard Osler, is currently working on the condominium documents that will be necessary to build out the market units at the Barnes tract as condominiums. There has never been any indication from that developer, by the way, that he intended to do anything there but build condominiums with the market units.
All right. Ms. Peckham has a question here. So from all these questions, I assume the town has approved the following developer to change from selling to renting the units?
The town has not finally approved that.
Until we vote.
I am recommending that the town do so on the terms and conditions that we have been discussing here this evening and that are reflected in the settlement document.
Okay.
But it is not final. That finality will not occur until there is a vote by the governing body with respect to the recommended settlement agreement. If the governing body recommends that it be approved or votes that it be approved, then that will be final.
All right. Another question here from Trisha Costin. Most seniors can't afford $4,500 a month. Will something be put in writing by the developer stating that they will not change the age for rentals?
I don't know. That issue has not been discussed, and I'm not sure that's an issue. In other words, at the moment, they're signing an agreement, a binding settlement agreement that says the minimum rent's going to be $4,500 a month. If they come in with a lease that's for less than $4,500 a month, then they won't get a C of O for that unit because that's not consistent with the terms of the settlement agreement.
Okay. Here's another one. How is the Barnes tract legally different from Alpine?
The Barnes tract is a redevelopment project where the borough had and has more control over the development than is the case with respect to Alpine. Alpine, the borough sold the Barnes tract to the developer as a redevelopment project. And so as part of that sale, we returned our control, retain more control. It was the case with the Alpine project. The Alpine project, the developer there just owned the property that he had bought from a third party.
All right, Kathy Jackowitz, what legal obligations are there that we have to entertain the rental issues when the property was being built to be sold?
The law of New Jersey, which says that a municipality's power to regulate the development of land does not extend to making or differentiating between owning and renting. That's the law of New Jersey. That's the law that was cited by Judge Dupuy at page 8 of her opinion that she rendered last November.
All right, and another one from John and Dottie Unchester. Have any of you been to Alpine site or viewed it from our neighborhood?
I have.
I have.
I have as well.
I have.
I've driven through too.
All right. Here's another one from Tina Milda. Will the town be reviewing the rules and regulations from the developer, i.e. the master lease, as part of the contract that the town is entering with the developer?
Would you read that question again, please?
Okay. Will the town be reviewing the rules and regulations from the developer, the master lease, as the contract that the town is entering with the developer?
The town will be reviewing every lease that the developer makes with any tenant, because that will be part of getting a certificate of occupancy, the developer getting a certificate of occupancy.
John, I think John, if I can interrupt, I think she's talking about the master deed and bylaws. I think she just used the wrong terminology.
If that is what Ms. Almeida meant, then the answer to that question is yes. That those are all being carefully reviewed by my office, and also by Mr. Lockwood, I should add.
All right, here's another question from Ray Santos. Why is Mountainside recommending the settlement to rent the units? Why doesn't Mountainside recommend Alpine keep the units for sale?
We do not have the power to do that. We cannot tell Alpine you can only sell these market units. We are unable to do that. The judge, that is at page 8 of Judge Dupuy's decision.
Okay. Here's another question. Will Mountainside provide busing for kids for schools from Alpine?
I assume if there are children.
No, I don't think the restrictions, John, I think the 55 and over, they're not allowed to have children residing in the units.
I think that's correct, Mr. Mayor. But what I was going to say is, if it should happen, but if it should happen that by some quirk or by some quirk, I guess is the best word, a child were there who qualified, were living in that project, who qualified under the rules and regulations governing who gets a bus ride to school in Mountainside, what kids get a bus ride, I think that child would get a bus ride. I'm not saying there would be any children in there. With the age restriction, certainly going back to the original affordable housing plan, one of the reasons why there was an age restriction imposed with respect to that project that was not imposed with respect to our other two affordable housing projects was to try to mitigate or minimize the impact on the number of kids in our school system that was going to result from these three different projects. And the premise was that the age restriction, and not, it shouldn't be was, is, that the age restriction on the Alpine project will either eliminate, or if not eliminate, substantially mitigate the number of kids who would be brought into our school system from that property.
Mr. Post, is it true that if their units were sold and they had children in those units for whatever reason, they still would be allowed to have children go to school? That doesn't change the rental or the sale of it. Doesn't really change that.
Correct.
That's
correct, Bob.
Okay.
All right, here's another question. Why did the town not contract with the developer to restrict the 24 units to the selling similar to the 6 low-income housing units?
Read that again, Matt.
Okay. Why did the town not contract with the developer to restrict the 20? Yeah, let's try this again. Hang on. I don't think
Who's it from?
written well. Tina Milda. Why did the town not contract with the developer to restrict the 24 units to selling similar to the 6 low-income units?
There was no indication at that time that the developer intended to rent the units. And if you were to ask me what might have happened had we, at the time that the original affordable housing plan was worked out, had we taken such a position, I don't know what might have happened. But that all goes back, I guess now at this point, about 3 years ago.
All right, Dottie and John Unchester, as a person who lives with your decisions on a daily basis, and for as long as I lived here, I must say that this is truly a sacrifice of few for the sake of many. Another one from John and Dottie Unchester. Those of us directly affected by all three developments in town are a few. All right. Here's another.
I'd like to make a comment or a response to that if I
Sure.
might.
Sure. Go ahead.
As I mentioned in my earlier comments, it is true that these three developments in town have given the town immunity, and by the town I mean all of the other residents in town, immunity from a comparable development. And so there is a ring of truth to saying that the people who live in the neighborhood of these three developments have given their fellow townsmen a degree of comfort because they had to have these projects go up in their property or close to their properties. The flip side of it, however, is that if it had to be, it seems to me what even these people have to understand is that it could have been a lot worse. And the example of how it could have been a lot worse reposes just a couple of miles west on Route 22. Just watch what goes on there as that area gets developed right there, right across on the other side of the border in Scotch Plains where Boatcraft used to be. See what gets built there, and then we have to appreciate how much less got built even on these three projects here in Mountainside.
John, I'll just, if you don't mind, the Boatcraft is 200 units, 190 apartments, 10 houses or 10 townhouses, 35 affordable units, and there will be 3 4-story buildings with over 400 parking spaces. Just to remind folks what's going on there.
Thank you, Rachel. And that makes my point that even though the people who live around in the contiguous areas to our three projects had to take a hit for the rest of the town, the hit was nowhere near as bad as it has been in other towns.
Yes.
All right, one more question here from Trisha Costin. These units are meant for 55 and over. Will there be something in writing as part of this agreement to change these units to rentals to keep them 55 and over?
Yes, that's part of the deal.
Okay. John and Don Unchester, is the borough considering property tax reductions for residents bordering Alpine?
My response there would be if any resident whose property borders Alpine or any of the other three projects believe that the value of their property has been negatively affected, they should take that to Mike Frangella, the taxes. As a matter of fact, they'll have the opportunity to make the case as part of the revaluation. When the people come around to talk about the valuation to be attributed to their property as part of the revaluation, they can provide whatever data information they have that supports that proposition, and I'm sure it'll be taken into consideration.
All right, I have one more question from Kathy Jackowitz. What is it to stop the contractor if he cannot rent them at $4,500 to come back and reduce the pricing yet again? What could the judge say to that?
Well, they'd have to first come to the borough and try to make the case to the borough. And if the borough believes that it's a meritorious case, the borough might do it. I'm not making any judgments about that, but they would first have to come to the borough. And if the borough would make whatever decision the borough believes to be the legally correct and appropriate decision, and then be prepared to defend that if the developer decided to sue us.
Okay, one more here from Brock Giordano. Can you describe the impact on the property value since it was sold? Let's do this again. Can you describe the impact on property values since these were being sold as $800,000 plus and now being rented at $4,500 a month?
I have no competence in that area to be able to translate how a rental of $4,500 a month would compare to a sale price of $850,000. I'd leave that to a real estate appraiser.
Okay, that's all I have at this moment.
Okay, so why don't we move on to number 7? There will be an opportunity for audience participation again at the end of the meeting. So why don't we move on to number 7, which is the appointment of Tristan O'Connor as a police officer. Keith, you want to comment on that?
Sure, we have a police officer that's going to be retiring. I believe his last day is going to be July 22nd of this year. This is a candidate that was interviewed during our last round of interviews. He's been on a waiting list per se, and rather than the municipality going through the time and expense of advertising and re-interviewing and retesting candidates, we went to that list and took the next person off the list to fulfill the vacancy of the retiring police officer.
Okay, anybody have any questions about that?
What would have been the harm of interviewing other candidates?
Well,
The harm of interviewing other candidates, well, we would have to, right now, we would have to advertise for new candidates. We would have to interview new candidates. We would have to go through the entire expense of that. And that's very, very time consuming. This officer's leaving July 22nd. If we can get this, if we have a viable candidate in place now, why would we not just, take him off of the list that we just did a couple of months ago?
I vehemently disagree with this. I'm going to be voting against this. I think we should have been given more choices.
well, we were
Okay.
given the choice of during the interview process, and he was the next person that was going to be hired at that point in time, and he would have been hired at that point in time if we were hiring another officer at that point in time. So, I don't.
As a matter of fact, Bob, if you recall, we were going to hire, I believe we hired 4. We were going to hire 5 at that time, but we decided to cut it to 4 and put this person on a wait list in anticipation of a retirement that actually didn't occur right away. So the retirement is happening now. So we're really not changing any decision that we had previously made. And this had been discussed at the last work session meeting that we all had together in the Borough Hall. It was brought up. I believe the full council was there when it was discussed, and we agreed at that point to take off the remaining list.
Can I just say something? Renee, usually there's always a list, and you usually go back to the list. Some people are on a list 5 years waiting to get onto a police force.
Yeah,
that's just my comment on this.
Yeah, I understand, but I would have liked to have seen some diversified choices here. So I'm going to vote no on this one.
That's fine. That's your choice to do that.
Okay, anyone else have any comment on the appointment of Tristan O'Connor? Okay, so next we have to do bills and claims. Renee, you want to take care of that?
Sure. Be it resolved by the mayor and council of Borough of Mountainside that the following bills of the persons named and for the amount stated below have been duly audited and found to be correct this 5th day of May 2020. The same be paid after council review if and when funds are available, and that the mayor, council president, administrator, and treasurer are hereby authorized and directed to sign and deliver warrants for the same, and that is in the amount of $36,836.75.
Okay, so we got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, poll the council, Martha, please.
Councilwoman Andre,
Yes.
Councilman Dirkus,
Yes.
Councilman Messler,
Yes.
Councilwoman Pacifico,
Yes.
Councilwoman Pater,
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Okay, so just some reminders. We are going to have, the next meeting is May the 19th The invocation will be done by Councilwoman Pater. So at this time, if we have any additional audience participation, now would be the time to do that. Matt, you have anything?
As of right now, I do not.
Let's just give it a minute.
We are on a 30-second delay.
Okay. 1 minute and 30 seconds then. Okay, so at this time, Martha, you want to read the executive session?
Whereas the Open Public Meetings Act of the State of New Jersey permits the public to be excluded from certain matters to be discussed by the governing body, and whereas the mayor and council desire to discuss litigation, contracts, and personnel, which are matters where the exclusion of the public is permitted. And whereas public disclosure of the results of the discussion will be made as soon as the matters discussed have been resolved by the governing body of the Borough of Mountainside. Now therefore be it resolved by the mayor and council of the Borough of Mountainside that the aforesaid matters should be discussed in session upon adoption of this resolution.
We're going to be discussing litigation and personnel, so I need a motion to go into exec.
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Okay, we're going to be in exec. We have to go on to the other link in order to do that, okay?
Okay,